Hello and welcome back to Matt's Automotive Channel. Finally, we have both of the head gaskets. And I'm kind of excited about this. And normally I wouldn't be. You would just normally go down to the auto parts store, get the gaskets you need, and put it on the motor. However, these heads have been through hell and high water, and they've been machined a number of times, and they've lost about 30 thousandths of the thickness. So that made it necessary for us to order a custom head gasket. These particular ones have a thickness of 60 thousandths. That's to make up for all the material that we've taken off these heads. Now, when I had received these heads, it had already been machined a number of times. They were already down about 20 thousandths or so. And the story behind this was I noticed that these heads were warped, so I took them into the machine shop. They shaved them down again, took more material off. Then I got it back here, reinstalled the cams, just to find out that the whole head was warped. And so the cam journals here were no longer lined up, which was putting a bind onto the camshafts. And to make it even worse, the camshafts were bent as well. And if you're interested in seeing that part of the hell that I had to go through, that's in some of the previous videos. But ultimately, we ended up having to straighten the cams out and the heads, and then take it back to the machine shop and then have it resurfaced on the bottom. Because once we had bent the heads and got the head straight, now the bottom that we just had machined was no longer flat, so it had to be machined again. And that's why there's so much material taken off of these heads. Now, I have the heads on here now with the old gaskets, and the only reason I did that was to pressure test everything to make sure that the valves were sealing. Again, you can see that in one of the previous videos. So anyway, right now what I'm going to do is pull these heads back off, and then I'll show you the difference between the stock head gaskets and the custom ones. Okay, let's take a look at the difference here. And just by looking at the edges of these, I'm looking at about 4 layers of steel here. And on this custom one, I'm looking at 6 layers of steel. So just for kicks, I thought I'd get out the caliper here and just kind of look at the difference. I realize these aren't compressed and this isn't going to be real accurate, but just out of curiosity, I kind of just want to see what the difference is. Okay, I'm just going to measure the edge of it right here. And there's a little protrusion here, so I'm not going to include that. And I just want the relative difference here. So if I look at that, it's right around 48. And if we look at this, and we're looking at about 75. So there's about 30 thousandths difference right there. So anyway, these are definitely thicker. So let's go ahead and get this all bolted up and put together. A couple things I want to note here before bolting these on, just to kind of show you that what we'll be dealing with a little bit later. And that's, of course, the position of the crank relative to the position of the cams. And this here is a tool that supposedly, when it's on, puts cylinder number 1 at top dead center. So I just wanted to verify that that's the case. And you can see there's a little keyway there. Notch fits in, and then this little hole here should fit around this stud. So I already have it clocked here perfectly for that. And you can see when the tool goes on that cylinder number 1 is at top dead center. And it looks like let's see, that'd be 4, 5, 6 is also at top dead center as well. The reason I'm looking at this is because once we get the cam followers in there, we have to start worrying about valve to piston clearance, and we don't want to damage that when we're putting the timing stuff on. And as you can see right now, all the valves are closed, so I don't have to worry about it, and I won't have to worry about it until I get the cam followers in the heads here. So I'm going to do that one of the very last things once I get all the timing marks lined up. But I just kind of wanted to verify, you know, what position this crank needs to be in relative to each of these cylinders. So I'll pull this off. Now, I saw one video where they say if this keyway is straight up or 90 degrees, so like at the 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock position or 6 o'clock, that all the pistons are down somewhat. None of them are at top dead center. So I just kind of wanted to verify that, make sure that that's the case. And let me go ahead and clock this thing to 12. So right there. And if you look at all these cylinders, yep, none of them are at top dead center. So, you know, if for some reason you do have an issue with the timing, that's just a good thing to know. Let's see. Let's also go ahead and move this at the 3 o'clock position and check. And looks like the case is still the same here. All of them are down. So I think what I heard was correct. Let's go to 6 just to make sure. And yep, all down. And then let's go to the 9 o'clock. It should be about right there. And they're all down. So anyway, just something to keep in mind when you're doing the timing on this motor. One other thing that I'd like to check before putting on is, since these are custom head gaskets, I want to make sure that they fully align with the old ones, just to make sure that all the holes look like they're in the proper place. So this particular gasket here is for the right head. And let's see here, right, okay, this is the right bank. So if I compare these, everything should line up properly. And if I set it right there, I think we're good. Now, if you're wondering how to determine which is the left and right side of the motor, I know most of the work is done here from the front of the motor, so you would think, that's the right side, but it's really as if you're in the driver's seat, which would put you about right here behind the motor. So this is the left side of the motor, and this is the right side of the motor. So we'll start out with the right head gasket, which is going to be over here on this side. Before putting the head gasket on, we need to make sure that the surface is completely clean. I like to get all the oil off, all the debris, anything in here that's going to interfere with the gasket and keep it from laying on here perfectly flat. And you can see that there's quite a bit of dirt on there still, probably from the old head gaskets that I put back on. And also, we need to make sure that I'm going to run a vacuum through each of these and just make sure all the debris is out of here. And I also put like another thin coat of oil in here, maybe a little bit of assembly lube, because on that first start, we want to make sure that these cylinders are not dry and minimize any kind of damage to the cylinder walls. Let's hit this with the vacuum. And let's put a little bit of oil on these cylinder walls here. Now, I already did do this when I installed the pistons, but this motor's been sitting here for quite a while, and I noticed a lot of it leaked out the bottom there. So just kind of want to make sure that we got a nice coating on these walls here, and I'll get as much oil on, cover as much of these cylinders as possible. So I'm going to do these two, and then I'm going to turn the crank to move these two down and then oil those as well. Okay, let's get the other ones down. There, this one's all the way down. Okay. And now this one's down. And when I put the head on, I realized you can put it on at an angle like this. There are a couple studs that hold it in place, but I'm always afraid just a little bit of a wobble or you hit it and you can knock the thing off. So I like to put the cylinder right there on the very top of the motor, just to make it that much safer. Okay, let's go ahead and lay this head gasket down on here. Very tight fit. Guess anytime you have something done custom, you have to worry about fitment. And boy, it's so close. So close. I think I'm going to have to work one of these down at a time, each layer at a time. It's just so close. It has to go on, I think, perfectly square. Wow, that's a very tight fit. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. They fit down here on one, and then by the time you get to the other, it's like these holes need to be a little bit further apart. It's very, very close. If I lift these off on this side, put it down here, same issue here. As you can see, it's just so very close, but not a perfect fit. So I have to figure out what to do here. All right, I got it. I just have to apply a lot of pressure right here on the very end with my fingertips and work its way down. There, we got it. It's a very tight fit. And I just make sure that the rest of these holes line up okay. And I believe they do. Looks like everything's lined up there just fine. But boy, yeah, that was a very, very tight fit there. That one isn't perfect overlay. I'll check on the old gasket and see if that's the case. I hope that doesn't create a restriction. Now, if I look at the old head gasket and put it on, of course, boy, that just fits on nice and easy. And yeah, I don't see any kind of restriction here. So I may need to talk to the machine shop and see if that's going to be an issue. After looking at this a little closer, I don't believe I'm going to worry about that. And then here's why. If you look at the old gasket, there's a single hole here. Here there's two separate holes. But if you look at the overall area between those two, it's going to be pretty much the same, because this is actually bigger diameter than the bottom part of this. And if there's a restriction there, it's not going to be much. So I'm not going to worry about it. And it looks like everything else lines up perfect. So we're just going to go ahead and go with this. Okay, while monkeying around with all these gaskets and getting my hands everywhere, I did get a little bit of oil on the top of this gasket. So I'm just going to make sure that that's all clean and free of oil. This lighter fluid works real well at removing oil. It's a very good solvent. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the cylinder heads too. Make sure that those are perfectly clean before I set the head down onto this gasket. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Turn my attention back to the cylinder head. Again, let's just look at this surface real quick. Make sure everything is nice and clean before we set this head down onto the gasket. And again, if you haven't seen one of the previous videos, this is another indication that this engine was producing some significant horsepower at one time, because it does have these fire rings here. And in fact, this was an issue because I really took these rings out, chipped out little parts of the head. And so right here where these are filled in, the machine shop actually did this. They used a TIG welder, welded in some new aluminum, and then resurfaced it. So we got rid of the nicks. This will enable the head gasket to do its job and seal really well. So anyway, again, just signs that this head has really been abused in the past. Let's get this cylinder head on. There we go, we got it. Now, these head bolts, they are torque yield, which means they're one-time use only. So anyway, these are from D&J, and these are OEM equivalent, and they are torque yield. So let's go ahead and just set these in. I did realize I left out a step, at least in the video. I actually did it, but I did put the old bolts back into the head and ran them all the way down, made sure that they're the same height to make sure that there is no debris or anything in the holes that these bolts go into. It's very important to make sure that there's no debris on these. They're well lubricated. So I'll put a little bit of oil on these threads, and then also up here around the head where the washer is, and also on the underside of the washer here where the washer meets up with the head. We just basically want to remove as much friction as possible so we can get accurate torque readings. And we'll do that with all the bolts, and once you got all those lubricated, go ahead and set them in. Okay, I got all the bolts in. I'm just going to get these down. I'm not going to put any kind of pressure or anything on this yet, but I just want to make sure that I get them all in here before I start the torque sequence. I got all these bolts down. They're not even snug yet. They're just down. And I'll bring up the torque sequence here so you can see exactly how we're going to do it. There's definitely a sequence that we do it in, and also a number of stages. With the torque sequence that I just showed you, we're going to start with 30 pound-feet. Okay, before starting this torque sequence, I went ahead and put the numbers on the head itself. That way I don't have to keep referring back to the manual. I can just look here on the head and go for it. The first thing we do is go to 30 pound-feet in this particular sequence. Nice not to have to go back to the manual. Just look right there and then do this quickly. Now, one thing I'm doing that I know is not listed in the procedure, but especially with this extra thick head gasket, each time I put one of these bolts down, it loosens some others because the scene is slowly sinking down. So for this first go around anyway, I like to go back over the sequence again with 30, and then what I find is I get a little more turn on each of these. So I'm going to keep repeating that process so I can go down on each of these bolts and get the click without it turning at all. Then I know that they're all down to 30 pound-feet and the torque or the pressure on the head is evenly distributed. Okay, the next step is to go an additional 90 degrees. So obviously I'm not going to go back over and do that, but at least the torque is the same on all of these at this point. So we'll start here. And just go an additional 90. I like to just line it up so it's going to the front of the motor. And then I just go to where it's perpendicular, and I know I'm good. So I'll just follow this all the way through the whole sequence. Now, I'm a firm believer in following this torque sequence to a T. Reason being is when I did go through the procedure of rebending these heads, it really didn't take that much effort to bend these. So I know that the amount of force that we're putting on these, if there was any kind of abnormality and whatnot, we would be stretching this thing or bending, warping the head. So again, very, very important that you do this in the proper sequence with the proper amount of torque and angle. All right, the next step is to go through the same sequence here and loosen them all exactly one turn. Now, I believe the reason for this is to kind of precondition this head gasket. So in other words, squish it down so everything kind of seats in, and then the next time you go through, the torque settings will be more accurate. It's not going to be based on the fact that you're compressing this head gasket because it's already compressed. As you saw, when on the first tightening that I did, each time I went down one of these bolts, the other ones loosened up. So I think that's where it's very important to go through this procedure correctly. And so now we're going to just go one full turn on each of these to loosen it completely up. So just start there and then go one time around, and I can feel that bolt is completely loose. So basically we're just going to start all over here. Yeah, it's just so easy to turn once you get it around once. There's no more tension on it. Now, real interesting, on number 9 here, I went all the way around and I could just feel it starting to lose its tension on that last turn. Same thing there. So anyway, these are all loose. I can twist them all by hand now. So now we're going to start over again in the sequence. And let's see, we'll go back and tighten to, again, 30 pound-feet. This time I don't anticipate that tightening one bolt will loosen the others. Let's go again, back to 30. And then I did just go back over a second time to see if tightening the other ones loosened up the previous ones. And it did, but only on the first 2 bolts, the 1 and 2. And it was very small turn. But I think that probably has to do with the fact that we're dealing with a non-standard head gasket that's extra thick and requires a little bit of extra crushing. So just something to be aware of. But it doesn't make sense, I think, in order to start doing the angle torquing until these are all torqued down until we have the specified torque on them. If we didn't go back over it, I would think that, well, without a doubt, the center ones would be looser than the end ones, and we don't want that. We want everything to be perfectly even. And once we start doing the angles, it will. Okay, the next thing to do is to tighten each of these an additional 90 degrees. So let's go do that. And then once these are tight 90, we go back and tighten them one more 90. And then at that point, we're done. Okay, so again, I'm going to start with the wrench here facing the front of the motor. And then I'll just go 90 degrees to where it's perpendicular. And then we'll just do that on each of these bolts in that sequence. Okay, now we've got them torqued 90 degrees. Now we'll do the same thing once again, an additional 90 degrees, and we are done. Okay, we're all done. This side, right side is done. Now we can turn our attention and do the exact same thing on the left side. However, I'm not going to bore you showing this. It's just the exact same procedure. All right, guys, got the heads all done. New gaskets are in place. So I'm going to call it quits here, and we'll start on the next one and start dealing with the timing. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.